Welcome to this home study module called Financial Calm, sailing your way out of an ocean of debt into a sea of prosperity. I'm Gretchen Oler-Hogg of lightenupandthrive.com, and I just wanted to introduce a little bit about myself and also my co-creator, Dr. Jerry Eddington. I'm a mind, body, soul coach, a hypnotherapist, educator, and mostly I'd like to say that I'm a catalyst for change. And my commitment to you is to assist you to lighten up and thrive and co-create a joy-filled life aligned with your divine purpose. And Dr. Jerry Eddington is a soul success coach, educator, mediator, energy healer, and facilitator of change. And she likes to say that her commitment to you is to assist you in co-creating the life that you are meant to live so you can lighten up and thrive. And you can find out more about our programs and our website at www.lightenupandthrive.com. So let's begin. Today we're going to explore several key points around what it takes to get yourself out of debt. And those are the 5 truths about debt and what you really need to know if you want to change your current debt situation. And also the 4 steps to take to get yourself ready to get out of debt. Now, there's also a preparatory work that is required first before really getting yourself out of debt. And then also to identify the 4 important actions that will help you successfully pay off your debt even sooner than you might think possible. Now, I know that each and every one of us can resonate with this on some level, and even at different points in our lives. All of us have probably experienced some level of debt, and also all of the concern and all of the angst that it takes for us to really dig ourselves out of debt. Debt has become such a common and accepted part of most everybody's lives, but unfortunately, people today end up digging very deep financial holes for themselves that can take a great deal of effort to climb out of. So, how is your financial hole? And the depth of the financial hole can vary at different points in our lives. For example, if we're just coming out of college and we're dealing with a lot of student loan debt, or maybe we've just purchased a home or condo or townhouse, whatever that is, every single one of us is going to experience some level of debt at various points in our lives. So what I'd like you to do is to take out your worksheet number 1, which has a title of A Whole Lot of Debt. And I'd like you just to pause the recording for a moment and answer the following yes or no questions to more clearly assess your debt situation. So you'll notice that there are 14 questions on worksheet number 1. So answer yes or no to I carry credit card balances for a long time and often pay only the minimum amount of debts due. Or maybe like number 10, I use money intended for other things to pay bills. So pause the recording for a moment and then just answer those questions on worksheet number 1 and just a yes or no response on that. These assessment questions point to some fairly big indicators of a potential debt situation. So, what makes people ignore debt warning signs when they see them show up in their lives? What do you suppose makes it hard for people to admit that they even have a debt problem? Well, some of the reasons might be, for example, that maybe people feel shame or they feel guilty. Or I call it ostrich syndrome, where we tend to bury our head in the sand and we don't want to look at anything that's above the surface. And sometimes we honestly just are unaware, or it's almost as if we just ignore, even though we know there's a huge white elephant in the room. I'd like to just make a few key points here. It's very likely that most of us will carry some debt during our lives. The reason we are more likely to have more debt than people 50 years ago is simple. Today, credit has become far easier to get than a generation ago. With credit so easily available, it takes much more discipline and effort for people to handle their finances and to live a debt-free life. And if we do end up in a debt situation, getting out of this predicament takes time, and it also takes commitment and, a little bit of sacrifice too. But it can be done, and that's the great news. And this training will show you how to do that. So let's dive into our exploration of debt by first busting more misperceptions that people have about debt and looking at the truths around what debt really is. As I said, getting out of debt takes effort and perseverance. Only you can decide if getting out of debt is worth the discipline it takes to achieve financial peace of mind. So before we get into the practical steps that will help, let's first explore the truths about the real face of debt. And there are really 5 essential things that you need to know about debt. Now, you'll notice that these truths are outlined on slide number 7, but let's go through them with a little bit more detail here. And you can also take notes on your worksheet number 2 that's titled The Lowdown on Debt, the 5 Truths about Debt. Pause the recording at any point in time if you need to, slow down and write down some of your extra thoughts. I'm going to just outline these key points for you, and I'd like you to also pay attention to some of the ones that you really feel strongly about. There are the 5 truths about debt that you need to keep in mind if you really want to fulfill your journey of becoming debt-free. So, number 1, debt trouble is easy. Credit cards are very convenient. They let us buy what we want even when we don't have the cash for it. But credit cards also tempt us to spend more than we can afford. In fact, research on consumer behavior shows that people spend 2 to 3 times more money when they shop with a credit card than if they use cash. The bottom line is that credit cards make us feel freer or looser with our money, and this can get us into debt really, really fast. I kind of think of credit cards like going to the grocery store when you're hungry. You buy a lot more food that you know you really need, and also stuff that you really don't necessarily want to be eating just because you're in a hunger situation. The second thing, most debt is bad. Debt is generally bad because when people are in debt, they are paying someone else for the pleasure of owning something earlier than they otherwise would have been able to obtain it. Paying money to someone else to satisfy our desire for instant gratification, well, it just doesn't make good money sense. The obvious exceptions to this is something like a mortgage or a car payment, those things that are more expensive, larger ticket items, but really important for basics in life. So, the third thing is that debt does bring risk. Most people don't handle debt responsibly. They have good intentions about paying off their debt, but instead the continued spending becomes a pattern. Debt accumulates, and then they can't pay it down. To avoid debt, we need to know what our financial boundaries are and not let our debt spiral out of control, which can easily happen, especially with high interest rates. Now, the fourth thing, debt makes you poor. Well, that sounds kind of obvious, right? And it should also make you a little angry or mad, because as long as you are paying other people to fund a lifestyle that you won't be able to sustain, they're the ones getting rich, not you. Well, here's an amazing, really interesting fact from Forbes magazine. In a recent study, 300 of the top 400 richest people in America said that the best way to become and stay wealthy is to stay out of debt. I'm going to repeat that one more time because I think that's really important to hear. In a recent study, 300 of the top 400 richest people in America said that the best way to become and stay wealthy is to stay out of debt. And this brings us to the fifth thing. Debt is not free. There's a tension that we feel, but don't fully realize around wanting something now, but paying for it later. Spending can certainly bring us immediate pleasure, but wanting it now comes with a high price, a cost that we end up paying over a long time through all those finance charges. Think about it this way. What could you do with an extra $400 a month? Maybe in 1 month's time, $400 isn't much, but imagine what $400 a month accumulated over 1 or 2 years would give you. I hope that's a huge shift in your consciousness. And for those of you that don't have maybe the quickest math brain calculations, that is over 1 year's time, $4,800, and over 2 years' time, $9,600. That's a lot of money. Most of us can afford the toys that we want if we're willing to save for a few months rather than purchasing them on credit. You see, committing to debt not only costs you a lot in interest charges, but it also prevents you from using your money to take advantage of other opportunities that may come your way. And then also, you might want to just pause for a moment and think about how much do you use your credit cards, and are you using debit cards and or both debit cards and credit cards? So, take a few moments and really just ask yourself what really stands out for you out of those 5 topics right there. That debt trouble is easy, most debt is bad, that debt brings risk, that debt overall makes you poor, and certainly that debt isn't free. If you pause and think about what are some of the other reasons why debt can get out of control so quickly for people, some of the reasons might be, for example, the student loans. That interest on that can really accumulate very quickly. So I want to ask you a question. If a friend of yours recognized that their debt was getting out of control, what would you advise them to do immediately if they came to you for advice? Well, you might want to think about suggesting that maybe they go see a debt counselor, or there's programs, for example, the Dave Ramsey system, which is an envelope system where you pay cash for everything, and if you don't have the cash, you simply don't buy. Or you might even look for transferring to a low interest or a 0 APR for a credit card, an introductory offer type of thing. Some people act compulsively and irrationally with their money, since access to easy credit plays to their emotions in ways that are hard to realize. Over time, people's behavior patterns around money become difficult to change, and this makes getting out of debt even more challenging. We have that out of sight, out of mind, and again, I like to call that the ostrich syndrome. Now we're going to do a fun exercise that shows how your patterns influence you without you even realizing. I'd like you to make sure that you're sitting down for a moment. I want you to lift your right foot off the floor and make clockwise circles with it. Again, sit down, lift your right foot off the floor, and make clockwise circles with it. Doesn't matter how fast or slow that you make the circles with your feet. But here's the thing, while you're doing that, I want you to also draw the number 6 in the air with your right hand. So draw the number 6 in the air with your right hand while you've got your right foot off the floor and making clockwise circles with it. Well, I don't know about you, when I try that becomes impossible because my foot automatically changes directions, and I'm sure yours did too, because no matter how many times you try for a different outcome, you won't be able to prevent your foot from changing directions. It's pre-programmed into our brains, and that's a habituated, automatic kind of a response. So you can't will yourself to change your thinking patterns any more than you can stop your foot from changing directions, no matter how inspired you are to change. The same is true for how we approach our debt situation. To get out of debt, we need to first change the entrenched thinking patterns that we have around money. Some of the key points that I want to make are that the more you understand why you act the way you do with money, the better you'll be able to change your debt situation. Living in an age of easy credit requires people to have a new kind of self-control. Preparation can help. That brings us to our next topic. There are 4 important preparation steps that you will need to take to be in the best possible position to attack and eliminate your debt. Let's take a look at these steps. Let's pull out worksheet number 3, which has the title of Preparing to Get Out of Debt. You might want to take some notes on this worksheet about what I'm going to share with you, and just include some of the key points that you really feel strongly about. And this goes along with slide number 8. So preparing to get out of debt, there are 4 important steps to take in order to get yourself in the best possible position to succeed in reducing and eventually eliminating your debt. These steps are: number 1, determine how much you can set aside each month to pay down your debt. Getting out of debt starts by taking a close look at your current spending and finding every spare dollar that you have to pay down your debt. In order to succeed, you will need to rethink what's truly a necessity for your life. Necessities are things like having food on the table, a place to live, and also, yes, adequate transportation. Everything else that you spend money on is something that you want, but can probably do without, or at least delay. This is an important step to reducing your debt, because if you continue only to pay the minimum on your debts and spend money on items that are not necessities, your debt situation won't improve. Consider this. The average credit card debt of households in the U.S. is $15,500. If you only paid the minimum monthly payment on this debt, it would take you more than 36 years to pay off that balance of $15,500. And during that time, you would have paid more than $21,000 in interest charges. That's pretty mind-blowing if you bring it to that level of understanding. And that's why it's important to dig deep into your pockets and find every dollar that you can pay down your debt with. And now the second step is build up an emergency fund. And right now you're probably thinking, I thought we were just paying off debt. Well, if you're in debt, you likely don't have any savings. And this leaves you exposed for when things do go wrong. And guess what? Things will go wrong. That's a fact of life. And if you don't have an emergency fund, what will you do when a major appliance breaks down, for example? Or maybe you're suddenly faced with a major car repair. Or you've been putting the expense on credit cards. And if that's your only option, that's how a lot of people get into trouble. Another example is with some health challenges or some unanticipated medical bills. So before you begin paying down your debt, you'll want to create an emergency fund. Most financial experts recommend a minimum of $1,000, but obviously any amount you set aside is better than nothing. Getting this fund in place is critical before tackling your debt. The third step, list your debts in order of their amounts, starting with the smallest amount. Now, there's a reason for listing them this way. We're after some quick wins with getting out of debt. You will feel more motivated and empowered if you see progress fairly quickly by paying your smallest debts first. The feeling of paying something off is much stronger than simply chipping away only a small amount toward a high interest, higher balance loan. It's sort of like listing off your to-do tasks. Every time you can check something off your list, there really is a good feeling, and it's a feeling of accomplishment. So step number 4 is implement a no debt spending policy. And this means that when you pay off a loan, you do not accumulate a balance again, nor do you incur any additional debts going forward. Now, this takes us to another aspect here, and I'd like you to really ask yourself, what do you need to believe about yourself to be successful at paying off your debt? You might want to pause the recording and just jot down some notes about what stands out the most for you about these steps, and then also what you need to believe about yourself to be successful at paying off your debt. And now I'm going to challenge you just a little bit. And we're going to do a very quick, I promise this is quick, but we're going to do an assessment of your spending and see how well you know where your money is going. So I want you to pull out worksheet number 4, and that has the title of Where It's All Going. Now on this worksheet, I'd like you to write down in the spaces provided how much you made last year, and that will be your net take home, and then divide that number by 12 to determine a monthly salary amount. So again, use your net take home salary figure. Now in the second step, I want you to list and total up those big monthly expenses that we all incur as part of just everyday living, like your mortgage, your rent, car payments, utilities, and any other necessary and predictable monthly expenditures. And again, you don't have to go look things up, but just some general numbers that can give you a quick ballpark estimate. And just remember that this is just for you to be looking at. So I want you to compare what you made to what you spent. And again, this activity is just for you to take a very quick but kind of a stark reality check of comparing what you made to what you're spending. When you look at what you made last year and you compare to what you spent, could you have possibly ended the year with extra cash to put into a savings account or to go toward paying a debt? Or did you realize through this process that your expenses actually exceed your income? And you'll notice just by doing this exercise, this is something that you can do at different points in time. And it's really a good way to have a quick assessment of where you're getting yourself into a little bit of a jam. So the key points are that it's not the big predictable expenses that typically get most of us into debt trouble, but rather it's those small extra expenses like eating out or buying that new outfit or the latest electronic gadget. Those are the things that are the real culprits. Or maybe it's that you're live in the city and you're taking a lot of taxis or Ubers instead of, taking the bus, whatever that is. And once we get into the patterns of get it now and pay for it later, it requires a great deal of effort to turn things around. And as I've mentioned before, debt is expensive, adding to your monthly expenses for months and years to come. Debt can fulfill an immediate want, but it creates a much bigger money problem down the road. So, to get out of debt, you must get your expenses in alignment with your income. It's just that simple. Only then can you stop adding to your debt and find extra money to pay it down. There are 2 important actions that you need to take once you are ready to start paying off your debt. So let's look at these actions. For most people, the key to getting out of debt is more about spending carefully rather than increasing their income. With that said, there are 4 important actions to take in order to pay off your debt. These 4 actions I want you to list on worksheet number 5, which has the title of Paying Off Your Debts. This also goes along with slide number 10. The first action is to look for extra funds to pay towards your debt. When we have a lot of debt and expense, we may feel like there's nothing extra to use to even apply towards our debt. But by taking an honest, intentional look at where we spend our money, we can almost always find places to cut, thereby giving us extra funds to apply to our debt. For example, perhaps you have a garage sale, or you take a short-term job, or maybe an extra work project, or sell some items that you no longer use. One of the best ways to find quick cash is to evaluate your expenses and determine areas to cut or to eliminate. For example, just eating at home more instead of eating out at restaurants a few times a week. So one of the best ways to find quick cash is to evaluate your expenses and determine areas to cut or eliminate. What if you didn't eat out for a month? Or maybe you carpooled to work? Or maybe you set a specific budget for groceries and planned your meals. For example, you could just shop on the periphery of a grocery store and get the real food instead of all of the pre-packaged foods in the center of the grocery store that actually are a lot more expensive in the long run. Maybe you reduced your cell phone plan, or watch movies at home instead of going out to the theater, or maybe you lower, a TV package or something like that. So all of these things combined can really add up to hundreds of dollars in a month and can help you to quickly build momentum towards reducing your debt. Remember, these sacrifices can just be short-term, but the payoff is huge. Soon enough, you can have your nice to haves back again and not have the burden of debt. The second action is blast away your smallest debt. Allocate all the money you can to your smallest debt and make minimum payments on everything else. By putting as much money as possible towards that smallest debt, you should be able to pay it off quickly, and this will give you a feeling of success and fuel your motivation to keep going. The third action is that use the snowball method. One of the best ways to eliminate debt is to use what financial experts call the snowball method. It works like this. Once you have paid off the first smallest debt, take the money that you were paying towards that debt and put it towards your next smallest debt. And here's the key. Not only are you going to pay the minimum monthly payment due on this next debt, but you're going to take the payment on the debt that you just paid off, plus any extra cash that you have, and apply it to this monthly payment. So let me repeat that one. The key is that not only are you going to pay the minimum monthly payment due on this next debt, but you're going to take the payment on the debt that you just paid off, plus any extra cash that you have, and apply it to this monthly payment. And then, when that debt is paid off, you take all the money that you were paying on the previous debt and roll it all into the next debt. It's just like the snowball method that is outlined on slide number 11. So you just continue to make your way down your debt list. And as you pay off each debt and move on to the next debt, you simply remember that you are saving money in all those interest charges too. And I know that's a really awesome feeling when you really can increase your awareness of that. You'll apply more money to each subsequent debt, and the process will begin to feel like a snowball rolling downhill, accelerating until you are applying your whole monthly debt reduction budget to your last outstanding debt. And that brings us to the fourth action step, which is to create milestones and celebrations. Create those benchmarks for yourself that when you reach these benchmarks, you will do something that you kind of celebrate your success. Your debt reduction process could take months or maybe years to achieve, but in order to keep your motivation throughout this time, create milestones along the way and celebrate as you reach them. This could be doing something special after a debt is paid or when your debt level reaches a certain amount. The key is to not accumulate any other debt while you're celebrating. So just a quick review for the key points here is that there are 4 actions that are the best and simplest way to tackle debt. These actions are effective because they give you quick wins and they help you stay on track. And also, paying down your debt may still be a long process depending on how much that you have accumulated, but this technique is still the fastest way to pay it off once and for all. The question that you might need to ask yourself at this point is whether you can stay focused for as long as it's going to take. So I'd like you to ask yourself this. Are you prepared to make the necessary sacrifices to get rid of your debt once and for all? And that takes us into the very next topic. So these 4 actions that you can take to pay down your debt and eventually eliminate your debt also involves this. Let's help you get into an action mode around this by identifying some of the debt payments that you have that you can attack utilizing the snowball method. So, as you're looking at that slide number 11, pull out worksheet number 6 at this point, and that has a title of the snowball method. Now for this activity, I do not want you to include those expected monthly expenses that you identified earlier, such as your mortgage or your car payments or those, basic home utilities. Because although those are debts, those are the necessary debts for most people to just live on a daily basis. They are typically not the main culprits anyway. So what I'd like you to do is focus your attention on those debt payments that you have incurred that aren't necessary for day-to-day living. So this could include your credit cards, store cards, personal loans, medical bills, and maybe even money that you borrowed from family and friends. Pause the recording, take a look at that worksheet number 6 and just list all of those debts that you have incurred outside of your expected monthly expenses, such as your mortgage or your car payments. And again, you may need to look up some of this quick information, so pause the recording at this point and just make a list of those. And now, after looking at this and just simply this act of writing down your debt payments, this can help prepare you for eliminating them. So in order for the snowball method to work, what characteristics do you think that you might need to focus on or have so that you can get into an action mode and stick with this process? Imagine, for example, that you're paying off your debt utilizing the snowball effect. How do you think that you might feel? And when you can identify how you're going to feel, ramp this up. Really feel it inside. Is it a feeling of being free or joyful or being, certainly a lot less stressed? Maybe you feel untethered. Some of the other feelings that you might need are commitment to yourself, persistence, really calling upon the discipline that you have within. Remember, you want to see the benefits, and you need to bring in some self-control to change habits. So the key points for this are that knowing your actual amount of debt grounds you into reality and lets you get down to the business of eliminating it. Just as debts can snowball and build into debt trouble, a debt repayment plan can snowball in the opposite way. It will pick up speed and become easier as you shed more and more of your debt obligations. And again, this will take commitment, but remember that by focusing on one debt at a time, you will get faster results and will feel a great sense of accomplishment and optimism. So this transitions us into the next topic. How to enjoy life while living within your means is ultimately the path that will lead you out of debt. Let's wrap this up and spend the rest of our time together by looking at what it will be like for you to finally become debt-free. We've offered you a simple strategy for getting out of debt thus far, but we all know that becoming debt-free isn't a quick fix. Getting out of debt takes time, but it also requires that going forward in your life that you've got to make changes, and those changes also mean changing your perspective on debt. This is on slide number 12, which has a title of New Horizons, Thinking Differently About Your Debt Situation. And this also ties in with worksheet number 7 with the title of New Horizons. The following thinking exercises can help stimulate your imagination and generate a fresh way to see your debt situation, but yet help you move forward in becoming debt-free. Now, on this worksheet, you can find several unique viewpoints to help you think differently, and if you can think differently, you can make different decisions and therefore bring about different results. The first question I'd like you to ask yourself, and then pause the recording to answer it, is, what is an opposite perspective of my current perspective that I hold about my debt situation? This is called reversing your thinking to see what's been overlooked. Reversing your perspective opens up your mind and lets you look at things differently than maybe you normally might. So what's the opposite perspective with your current perspective that you're holding on to about your debt situation? So take a moment to answer that. And now the second question. What are 3 negative assumptions do you regularly make about your debt situation that keeps you stuck? What are 3 negative assumptions? So pause the recording. Just take a few moments and answer that. And now, 2A, that question is, what happens when you reframe those negative assumptions by reversing them into a positive statement? Again, pause the recording, and I'd like you to answer that as well. A nice mantra, for example, is, I am maintaining my current lifestyle with grace and ease. So that's a nice little mantra, or another word for that might be an affirmation. I am maintaining my current lifestyle with grace and ease. So some final key points that I just would like to make is by using a quote from Benjamin Franklin, who once said, beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship. So as you set out to become debt-free, remember that it's your money, your finances, and yes, it's also your debt, and it's your responsibility. So keep asking yourself, how badly do you really want to become debt-free? What will it feel like when your final debt is paid off? And are you willing to persevere until your debt balance is 0? And then ask yourself this, will you commit to remaining debt-free? And if you can implement the strategies from this home study module, you prepare to get yourself out of debt and then take the actions that we explored with you, you will see that your debt can dwindle and eventually disappear. But to stay committed is your choice. Unless you have someone to support you to make sure that you follow through, you're on your own. On occasion, remind yourself of what it will be like for you to finally be able to say, I have no debt. So keep the new horizons that you want to reach firmly in your sight. And the last key points, just to reinforce with you, is that it takes discipline, time, effort and self-control, and understanding, preparation and sacrifice to handle finances and live debt-free. You must get your expenses in alignment with your income and know your debt payoff one debt at a time. It takes commitment and implementing the key strategies and the techniques to improve your financial situation and then sail into those new horizons. Jerry and I just included one more exercise sheet that we call home play, and it's called One Day. For one day, write down every bit of money that you spend and what you bought with it, just like you use the register in your checkbook, just to make notes of the checks that you write. So keep it simple so this doesn't become a burden. All you really need to do is write down the amount you spent. Just try it for one day. You'll be amazed at how easy it is and how much it shows you. It's very revealing. You won't wonder anymore about what happened to all that money that you put in your wallet. You'll know. Once you see how easy it is, keep it going. Track your spending every day for a week. Every now and then, challenge yourself. So that's a financial calm bonus called One Day. It's a home play exercise. Jerry and I want to thank you for participating in this home study module called Financial Calm. We also would love for you to check out our other transformational 28-day soul coaching programs at our website, which is www.lightenupandthrive.com. And we offer 2 28-day soul coaching programs called Let Your Soul Shine and Letting Go into the Flow. We also offer a number of other educational modules and exciting home study programs. So until then, keep thriving. Thanks again for joining us.